In our previous episode, we got to the end of the Bronze Age. An incredible stage in our history, which was from the year 3200 to 1200 before the current era. A stage in which many of the first civilizations reached their apogee. In Mesopotamia, in Egypt, in Anatolia, in Greece, and in the Indus Valley. And then, all collapsed at the same time, around the year 1200 before the current era, an event which is still shrouded in mystery. It is the stage of history that left us the Great Pyramids, that of the heyday of Egypt, of the powerful pharaohs, that of the origin of writing, of the Sumerian civilization, of the Akkadian Empire, among other incredible events that marked our history. But so you don't miss out on all this, I leave you a link to our previous episode, right up here. Now we're going to explore the stage of the Iron Age, which goes from the year 1200 to 600 before the current era. It was the period of emergence of the powerful Assyrian Empire, of the Phoenicians, of the kingdoms of Israel and Judea. It is also the period in which the Roman monarchy began to emerge, the Greek polis, with Athens and Sparta as its main exponents, and the rise of the Babylonian Empire, among other events that marked this exciting stage in the history of our world. In previous episodes of our Origin series, we also explored the origin of our universe, that of life, the prehistory of our world, and the origin of the first civilizations. And we leave you a link to our playlist in chronological order, right up here. But now, we travel to the year 1200 before the current era, to the moment in which this extraordinary stage of the history of humanity begins. The Iron Age. Before we go deeper into this story, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a like so that this video can also be useful to many more people. At the beginning of the 13th century, men learned to melt iron and combine it with coal to produce steel. Iron ore is soft and useless, but steel is a hard metal, so it had incalculable strategic value. With iron, more resistant swords and spearheads began to be made, capable of piercing enemy shields, armors, and helmets. But iron was also crucial in the development of agriculture. By supplying hoes, plowheads, or sickles that are as strong as they are sharp, it made possible bigger harvests with less effort. The discovery took place in the southern Caucasus, around the year 1300 before the current era, in an area controlled at the time by the powerful Hittite kingdom. Iron casting techniques were much more complicated than those of bronze, requiring much higher temperatures. The Hittites kept the new technique a secret, waiting to be used on a large scale. Thus, for some time, the civilized regions ignored their existence. However, for the nomadic Indo-European tribes, a few iron weapons could be decisive in small fights with neighboring tribes. So the new techniques spread north among the Indo-European peoples. And that marked the beginning of the Iron Age. As we explored in our previous episode, for which I leave you a link above, by the year 1200 before the current era, the eastern Mediterranean suffered a serious setback. All major cities were affected. The great civilizations of the Bronze Age were collapsing. These, the greatest civilizations of the time, were wiped out. Tens of thousands were killed or displaced. Everything collapsed. What happened at the end of the 13th century remains a mystery. But one thing we do know is that the so-called Sea Peoples were one of the factors that drove the collapse of these great civilizations. They were a group of peoples who migrated to the Near East during the 13th century before the current era, sailing along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. The identity of the peoples of the sea has been an enigma. The violence of the pirate attacks increased, as did the confusion among the devastated civilizations. These invading peoples completely changed the map of the region. Egypt had rejected the Sea Peoples, but after Pharaoh Merneptah's death, Egypt fell into near anarchy. The Sea Peoples went to Cyprus, and from there, they attacked Phoenicia. In the year 1200, they razed the cities of Tyre and Sidon. In that same year, Palestine was also occupied by the Sea Peoples. These called themselves Peliset, although they are now known as Philistines. The Phoenicians were extraordinary blacksmiths. They were the greatest sailors in the world. Inhabited since the beginning of the second millennium before the current era by Canaanite Semites, historical Phoenicia extended over a narrow coastal strip of 40 kilometers from Mount Carmel to Ugarit. A total of about 300 kilometers. Its territory was divided into small city-states, separated by rocky spurs. Its soil, mountainous and not very suitable for agriculture, oriented its inhabitants towards maritime activities. And using iron keels, they revolutionized shipbuilding. They were the first great explorers and reached the Atlantic. They established trade networks and settled in new colonies and cities. Carthage was the most famous of these. But the most important contribution of the Phoenicians to humanity was not shipbuilding, exploration, or trade. Their greatest contribution was the alphabet. His alphabet laid the foundation for the development of writing throughout the West. In 1191, the king Shubbaluliuma II dies, and with him, the Hittite Empire disappears from history, dismembered by the Sea peoples and internal uprisings. To the northwest of Anatolia, the Phrygians began to stand out. Assyria began a long period of frustrating struggles, in which it tried to dominate the surrounding territories without success, but could not control Babylon, and especially the powerful kingdom of Urartu. By 1190, Babylon had been freed from Assyrian domination, but its Kassite rulers were unable to take advantage of the situation, and it was left in anarchy. Who did know how to react was ancient Elam, that sent expeditions to plunder Babylon. From Cyprus, the peoples of the sea attacked Canaan and advanced again towards Egypt. In 1177, Ramses III managed to repulse them in what is considered the first naval battle in history. But this would be his last campaign. Egypt lost its imperial possessions thereafter. Its borders were reduced to the Nile Valley. By 1078, the new kingdom of Egypt had ended. Meanwhile, in the Balkan Peninsula, around the year 1100 before the current era, the Dorians occupied the Peloponnese, completing the conquest of Greece, and definitively ending the Mycenaean Age. Walled cities became self-contained units under Dorian rule, known as polis. Sparta became a major Dorian polis, while Mycenae, Tiryns, and other major cities of the earlier period were burned down and reduced to sad villages. There were, however, a few regions that were freed from Dorian rule. One of them was Attica, with Athens at the head, and another was Arcadia, located in the highest mountains of the Peloponnese. In these areas, an Ionian identity emerged that claimed its legitimate occupation of Greece against the invading Dorians. By 1075, in Canaan, the Phoenicians and the Philistines were occupying the coast with some prosperity, while the Israelites were consolidating their conquests. By 1050, without Egyptian intervention, the Israelites were able to penetrate Canaan more easily. Little by little, they were confronting the local cities. On the other hand, they could not prevail over the Philistines, who despite being few, had iron weapons. The tribes of Judah and Simeon were included in the Federation of Israel. By 1024 before the current era, the Hebrews were united behind their first king. It was Saul. If Israel wanted to survive, it needed to unite under a single command. Crowned by the prophet Samuel, he thus became the first king of Israel. Saul fought to secure the kingdom of the Israelites. The Philistines were his great enemy. The war against the Philistines was constant. Saul eventually confronted Samuel and became suspicious to the point of paranoia. Among the victims of his suspicions was a young Jew who had moved to Gibeah after the annexation. His name was David, and he belonged to an important family from Bethlehem, south of Jerusalem. David was an intelligent politician and also a good general. David became one of Israel's great warriors. Saul then tried to assassinate David. And David had to flee Israel. Saul continued his fight against the Philistines. Around 1000 before the current era, a Philistine army once again confronted Israel. The Israelite army was overwhelmed by the heavy Philistine weaponry. Saul's son died in battle. Then Saul, seeing everything lost, committed suicide. The Philistines once again gained hegemony over Israel, as if Saul had never existed. After Saul's death, they were completely at the mercy of the Philistines. For Israel, the need for a strong king was indisputable, and the only candidate was David. David was proclaimed king of Israel in the year 991 before the current era. The crown passed to the exiled David, who became the new king. His mission was to secure a new home for his people. That new home was Jerusalem. In 990, David led an attack on the city, the one that was captured and became the capital of Israel. After taking Jerusalem, the Philistines demanded him to leave the city. David refused, and so he went to war. The result was a complete victory over the Philistines, who from that moment abandoned all imperialistic ideas forever. Once the new capital was established in Jerusalem, David's efforts to unify his two-member kingdom turned to religion. Among the fertile Israelite mythology, the part that offered the most unifying possibilities was the one referring to Moses and his alliance with God. With the nation politically and religiously united, David found himself with the strength to initiate an imperialist expansion. One by one, he conquered the Hebrew kingdoms of Ammon, Moab, and Edom. He then advanced even further north. He did not attempt to attack the Phoenicians. In this way, the Israelites saw themselves as owners of an empire of respectable dimensions. Meanwhile in China, around 1050 before the current era, the kingdom of Zhou, until then a vassal of the Shang dynasty, began an attack on it. The battle marked the end of the Shang dynasty and the beginning of the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty ruled for 300 years. Chinese kingdoms became vassal states. China became a mosaic of kingdoms under the rule of the Zhou. But in 771 before the current era, a threat appeared on the western border. Barbarian peoples besieged the capital of Hao. barbarians breached house defenses. The city was looted. The Zhou king had to flee. After Hao was sacked, the Zhou migrated to eastern China. There, they would prevail another 500 years. But the real power over China was no longer in his hands. In the Middle East, by 961 before the current era, King David was near death, and succession tensions were higher than ever. In 960, David's son, Solomon, was crowned king. His reign was Israel's golden age. The kingdom flourished. Solomon built the Great Temple in Jerusalem. No king of Israel had ever had as much power as Solomon. He led a great empire. Gradually, the expenses of the court began to exceed the income. Solomon had to reform the collection of taxes. To do this, he divided the empire into 12 districts and put a governor in charge of each of them. This new tax collection system caused the discontent of the people. In addition, Solomon left Judah free from paying taxes, while the Israelites were equated with conquered peoples, such as Ammon, Moab, or Edom. By 940 before the current era, the external situation, until then so favorable to Israel, began to change. In that year, the first king of the 22nd dynasty, Shishonq I, came to the throne of Egypt, and Egypt was once again united. After the death of Solomon, which took place in 931, different revolts generated a complete dismemberment of the kingdom. Syria took over northern Israel, and Ammon regained its independence. In 926 before the current era, the king of Egypt, Shishonq I, invaded Judah, sacked Jerusalem, and took much of the treasures that Solomon had accumulated. Meanwhile, in the East, a new superpower was emerging. This superpower was arising in Assyria. By 870, King Ashurbanipal II had established a new Assyrian empire. The city of Nineveh was the center of the empire. Ashurbanipal II, for the first time, had an army fully equipped with iron weapons. This made it the most powerful army on the planet. Ashurbanipal destroyed the Aramean principalities, restoring prosperity to Assyria. In Kalach, he built a large palace of some 24,000 square meters in area. From there, the Assyrian Empire would become the largest the world had ever seen. Ashurbanipal II is remembered as the cruelest of the Assyrian kings. He carried out mass executions. He imposed a policy of terror that made the subject peoples desist from the slightest attempt at rebellion. But he left an indelible mark of hatred of Assyria throughout the Middle East. Subjugated populations were deported from their lands, taken to Assyria to work as slaves. In 859, Ashurbanipal II died and was succeeded by his son, Shalmaneser III, who decided to extend the domains of the already extensive empire that his father had bequeathed to him. But from 824, after the death of Shalmaneser III, Assyria began a period of decline ruled by weak monarchs. In 745 before the current era, a general staged a coup, ending a dynasty that had ruled the country for 1,000 years. The new king took the name of a great Assyrian conqueror and became Tiglath-Pileser III. Under his rule, Assyria resurfaced. It achieved a huge expansion. He imposed tribute on Israel, Damascus, and Babylon. Tiglath-Pileser III died in 727 and was succeeded by his son, Shalmaneser V. By 622 before the current era, Assyria found itself surrounded by enemies, ready to swoop down on the empire. By 612, the Medes, Babylonians, and Scythians invaded and destroyed Nineveh. It was the end of the Assyrian Empire. In its place, a new empire arose, centered around the greatest city of the ancient world. It was the Babylonian Empire. Nebuchadnezzar II ruled there and made Babylon the most powerful nation in the Middle East. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was the greatest city on earth up to that time. He built the imposing Ishtar Gate, and the legendary Hanging Gardens. $250,000 people lived in the city. In 587, Nebuchadnezzar led his army west towards Jerusalem after a revolt by the Israelites. The Israelites took refuge behind the city walls. But the Babylonians besieged the city, and after 18 months of siege, they attacked and plundered everything in their path. They then burned the city, and the Jews were taken as slaves to Babylon. And in Babylon, they did something that would change the world forever. There, they wrote their history and their beliefs in what was the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. Beginning with the creation, Noah's Ark, and the worldwide flood. The call of Abraham, and the Promised Land. Slavery in Egypt. Moses, and the 10 plagues. The Exodus and the return to Canaan. The texts written in Babylon would become the foundation of two great religions. The Jews remained in Babylon for 50 years until the city was conquered by foreign invaders. Babylon would then become the heart of one of the greatest empires the world had ever seen, the Persian Empire. but we will explore all about the Persian Empire and everything that happened in the incredible period of time of the classical antiquity. In next episodes of our series, from the year 600 until the year 500 before the current era. It is the period in which the apogee of the Persian Empire occurs. That of the ancient Greece, the empire of Alexander the Great, the Persian Wars, the clashes between Athens and Sparta, and the rise and peak of the Roman Empire. Thank you for coming this far. Please don't forget to subscribe. Leave us a like. And if you like the content, don't forget to share it. Also remember that in our channel, we have a playlist in which you will have all the episodes of our Origin series in chronological order and by stages of the history of our world. Thanks for watching. And let's meet in our next video.